Take a look at this picture and tell me, what do you see? Have you ever considered why we call people who come from a different country sometimes expats and sometimes immigrants? Are there any criteria that determine the use of one word versus the other? Many scholars in the field of intercultural communication have considered that. In an article published in 2014 by the Wall Street Journal, the author suggests that one's country of origin, racial background, and economic status tend to determine how we use one word instead of the other. So in chapter 3, we are going to look into this notion of adapting to a new culture. Specifically, we're going to look into these two approaches to adaptation, which are assimilation and integration. And into the Bennett scale, adaptation is this idea of what it takes for one person to move from their original culture, their native culture, to a new one. On chapter 1, we talked a little bit about different metaphors for adaptation, specifically the melting pot versus the salad bowl. So assimilation is this idea that in order to become a real American, one needs to blend into mainstream American culture, primarily abandoning language, customs, beliefs. I've came across many people who are first-generation Americans and have told me that they wish their parents have taught them their native language, Japanese, Korean, Portuguese, Spanish, but their parents didn't because they wanted their kids to be truly American. This kind of mindset was predominant between 1780s and 1970s in the United States. So after the Indian War, perhaps the most tragic and traumatic example of assimilation was Native American assimilation after the Indian War, so in the 1780s, where Native Americans were forced to abandon their customs, beliefs, language, religious rituals, and assimilate to mainstream or dominant American culture. This was called the civilizing method, and there's a lot of portraits that show this time period. And this kind of traumatic assimilation happened in the United States, mostly in the form of education, but it wasn't unique to the United States alone. It happened all over Latin America. And in Latin America, most often than not, it happened through religion, through Christianity and the missions. Yet both are forms of assimilation. On the other hand, you have the idea of integration. So integration suggests that in order to fully function and be adapted and integrated to a new culture, one can keep their cultural background. One can continue to keep their language, customs, and rituals. Now, when we're talking about integration specifically in the United States, it comes together with the idea of desegregation. And desegregation happened between 1940s and 1980s, where was mostly focused on incorporating racial groups to larger white majorities. There were judicial reforms such as Brown versus Board of Education and legislative reforms such as the Civil Acts of 1964 that tried to ensure this type of integration. Now, what's really sad is that while forced segregation ended, nowadays, poor communities are perhaps more segregated than ever. And some suggest that the reason for that is that while segregation existed, you had richer, more powerful members of the community, for example, the Black community that lived in segregated neighborhoods. And when forced segregation ended, those community leaders moved to integrated neighborhoods, moved their business and their families to integrated neighborhoods, leaving this enclave of poverty where social mobility can be very difficult. Milton Bennett, in 1968, he actually before that, he joined the Peace Corps and lived in Micronesia for 2 years. And then when he returned, he chose to pursue a doctoral degree program in intercultural communication to try to make sense of his experiences adapting to a new culture. And in this process, he developed the developmental model of intercultural sensitivity, also known as the DMIS scale or the Bennett scale. Milton Bennett still is a leading voice in the field of intercultural communication, very well respected. And his model is really cool because it tries to help people moving from moving cultures to adjust well. It does so, I should say, by helping one question their assumptions and being open to more to newer experiences, right? Hence, you see here in the bottom, moving from ethnocentrism, which is this idea that my own ways are better than anyone that does something different, right? Seeing myself and my cultural ways as superior to others, to ethno-relativism, which is understanding differences from a cultural context. There are 6 levels to the Bennett scale. The first one is denial, which is a level where someone doesn't even realize that there are certain cultural differences that may be important. The second level, which is still an ethnocentric level, is the level of defense. I feel threatened by difference, right? I have to defend it. I see my ways as superior, and I feel threatened by any type of difference. Minimization is also an ethnocentric stage, and is this idea that I have to focus on similarities, which sometimes can be good, but oftentimes, as we discussed in chapter 2, erases essential differences. Minimization says that I just focus on what's similar because the differences make me uncomfortable. Acceptance is the first level of ethno-relativism stage. In the acceptance stage, I start to focus and grasp the importance of difference. Adaptation is the stage where one can begin exploring and researching other cultures. And finally, integration is the stage when one fully develops empathy and skill in adapting. You are going to have the opportunity to fully explore the scale next week when you do visual research project. And I will talk to you next time.